Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hensley.
Here.
Ms. Gallagher.
Here.
Mrs. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Yeager.
Here.
Dr. Dykeman.
Here.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Gant. Ms. Hull. And Dr. Maddox.
Here.
Thank you. Now we will move to item number 2, to amend or adopt the agenda. Can I please get a motion to amend or adopt?
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Davis. Second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Maddox. Can I please get a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. We will approve or adopt the agenda before us. All right, now let's move to item number 3, information items. There were 2 items presented on the agenda. The first was the Early Head Start Policy Council meeting minutes and reports, and the second was the SPLOST monthly report. Do we have any questions or comments about either?
I just have a quick question about the Head Start Policy Council meeting minutes. There was mention of a purchase of a bus. Is that going to be exclusively for the use of the Head Start, Early Head Start program, or does it fall into our transportation pool? Hi, Gary.
We need a mic.
It does fall within our transportation pool and meets all of the requirements of one of our transportation buses, but it will be utilized for programming for Early Head Start and Head Start, and when needed, will support transportation needs across the district. Typically, our Early Head Start buses run to our early learning centers.
Okay. So does it come equipped with, like, those little children's seats, or?
They come, one of the buses we've ordered comes equipped with the STAR seats. The other, we will be purchasing the STAR seats to be installed.
Okay, and they will be permanently installed?
Yes, ma'am. There'll be STAR seats that are either built into the seats themselves or attached to the seats. And a STAR seat is essentially a school bus ready car seat.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Sure.
Great.
Okay, do we have any other questions? All right, we will now move on to item number 4, Board Community Reports. The first is the Community Oversight Committee / SPLOST report, and that is Dr. Maddox, correct? Nope, Dr. Yeager.
Yes, I was out of town for this meeting, so I was not attending, and I don't see any other board member attended. I'm sorry about that.
So could we go back to the SPLOST report, monthly report? Item B.
Okay, so you want to go back to 3?
Yeah, if we could go back to that one.
Okay.
Thank you. So I noticed on that report that we are about to, there's a new project that's coming online. I can't remember which one it was, and I'm not looking at it. Well, here we go. That last project, I just wasn't familiar with it.
The culinary program?
Well, the culinary program, we've talked about that before, so yes, I have some questions about that. But the last thing that I saw was a new, the tower. Is that what it is? Yes. What is that?
That's a request from Clark Central for a rappelling tower.
It's a what now?
It's ROTC, right?
ROTC rappelling tower.
Repelling tower for
repelling
ROTC.
Repelling.
Okay, and so that was a part of the SPLOST package?
Well, we're looking at it. It's going to have some budget constraints because we're kind of waiting to see until Clark Middle bids and the culinary program bids to see how much money we're going to have left over from 5 and then going into 6.
Do we have any preliminary estimates on that, or?
On
On that tower, on building that wall of the wall?
No, they range anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. So we've got to define the program and components of it and go from there. That's just kind of putting it on our planning calendar to start taking a look at.
So we just picked this off of one of our lists of pending projects, you know?
Yeah, this was a request. I think Dr. Thomas had talked about it several months ago, and we kind of gave a range of 6 to 18 months to when we could, before we could start looking at it. So that's in that time frame to do.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for telling me that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, repel power.
I'll just say that the next meeting is next Tuesday, the 11th, and I do plan to attend. So if anyone has any questions they want me to see addressed, I can ask those questions at the meeting.
Okay.
I thought of one. So on here, Early Learning Center, and I know the field house, it says construction, current stage construction, I know the field house. But what else are we doing at the Early Learning East?
We're finishing up the playground, and we have the canopies to put in. We're going to do that when the students aren't there. Over Thanksgiving break, we have to pour the footings, and then over Christmas break, we're going to actually install the bus canopies out front.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
For the Georgia School Board Associations, there were just a couple of announcements in the agenda. Of note, the annual conference is December 1st and 2nd in Atlanta. As everyone knows, if you're going to go, please make sure that you add your name to Mrs. Palmer's spreadsheet. And then there is a consortium of school boards associations meeting as well that's happening in March. And I think that that's more for the executive officers, but, you know, just kind of throwing it out there as information. And this is not part of GSBA, but our CUBE conference was postponed due to Hurricane Ian. So that will, that's been rescheduled for December 8th and 9th. And for those who were not able to attend for this one, perhaps we can add more people to attend the December event. And so, yeah, that's it for Georgia School Board Association. Now we will move over to advisory board reports, item number 5. Any questions? If there are no questions, I just wanted to update everyone on the Board Advisory Council. So I sent an email earlier today about the meetings that are scheduled for the year for the Board Advisory Council. The first one is October, I want to say 26th. And we did agree as a board that we would have 3 members attend each of those meetings, with one person being the recorder and reporting back to the full board. So if you can please just look at those 3 dates that we have earmarked. We will send out a sign-up sheet for people to volunteer their time for any of those 3 meetings. Yes, Ms. Davis.
May I ask that we just assign board members to a slot, and then if we can't make our slot, we trade with someone so that we don't put this on Lisa to have to try and track us down for signing up for that, if we all agree to do it.
Okay, we can certainly do that if that's the will of the board.
That'll save us a lot of emails.
It's a Google spreadsheet, but okay. All right, so what I can do, or President Gant, we can just assign members for either of those 3 dates. 2 people are rolling off, so we'll have to be mindful of that. And if you cannot make the assigned dates, just let us know and we'll try to shuffle some things around.
Well, make it our responsibility to find a replacement. We can do that.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Thank
Do we
you.
have a time for that meeting, or just the date?
Yes, there was a time. It's in the it's in that email. I think it was 5:15 p.m. on those Wednesdays, and they're all Wednesday dates.
And they're all virtual.
And they're all virtual. We decided to keep them on Zoom just to make them accessible to more audience members. And Ms. Moore will also post the information about these meetings publicly, and they will be live streamed. right, any questions? Okay, so we'll send that information out to you all within a week.
Thank you.
All right, and now we will move on to item number 6, the board president's report. I think I just covered everything on that report, with the exception of, this is Dr. Superintendent Thomas's last meeting with us. So I think that this is an opportune time for us to thank her for her time and patience and service and dedication to the school district and also to the board. And we will miss you. And we have weathered many storms over a very short period of time, but we hope that you won't become a stranger. Okay. Would anyone else like to say anything before we move on?
I have 4 different groups that are interested in having you join them to continue this extraordinary work that you have started, so we will talk.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for all that you've done for us. And this community is not unaware of the significance of your time in service here. It is historic for us. It is absolutely probably one of the most gratifying things that I've done since I've been on the board was to vote to appoint you into that position. And thank you for serving so eloquently. I'll stop there.
And we do look forward to celebrating with you on Sunday. So we will, this is not the last, second to last. All right, that is all for me for the president's report.
I didn't want to say something.
Yes, Dr. Maddox.
Knowing Dr. Thomas as long as I have, she is definitely our woman king, being the only female person to serve as the superintendent, you know, and you have done it well. You came in at a very difficult time, and you really performed with grace, you know, with your little sidebars. Now, you got a little shading. I like it. So I just wish you, you know, a lot of days of rest. I know that you're not done because I know how you love your babies in this community. I've seen it as early as J.J. Harris and even before. So I know that we'll be working together out there in the community. So thank you for everything that you've done and for stepping up to the plate and doing it so well.
Well, thank you all. Seriously, and I hope we collectively, some of us were here earlier in the process. Some of you have been fortunate to have come along a little later and have missed some of the growing pains. But I hope that you don't forget how much work has been accomplished in terms of just being able to sit here today and do the work. And it may not always be perfect. We may not always agree. We shouldn't always agree. That's how I used the language with Ms. Boness earlier today, that iron sharpens iron. And that's how we get better. But to be able to do that in a way that's productive and healthy. And I do think sometimes it's easy to forget, and we self-reflect and are like, God, we have so far to go, and we forget how far we've come. And for those of us who were there 3 years ago or 2 years ago, to have weathered some of those storms and to be here today and be in a place where we can really focus on the work. And I'm excited about what Dr. Hooker can do, but I feel like now we're in a place to be able to go to that next step. And in all honesty, we weren't there 3 years ago. And so to be in a collective space where we can now really focus on changing lives for children, I'm just appreciative of the board for being willing to do the hard work to get us to the place of now being able to do more hard work, but we're in a place where we can do it. And I'm excited about what's going to come next and where you all are going to lead Clark County Schools. So I thank you for the opportunity to have worked with you and served with you and really positioning Clark County to go to some great places. So thank you.
Oh, I don't know how how do we move on from that?
I'm just jumping on my superintendent's report. I want you to do it.
Let's do that. But I do want to acknowledge too that Dr. Gant, President Gant could not be here, but she also sends her well wishes
Thank
as
you,
well.
thank you.
Okay, we will move on to the superintendent's report.
And it's good things today. Just update, wanted you all to know the calendar committee is working aggressively to get a calendar ready. They have gotten a lot of feedback and survey results, and so they're reviewing that data, compiling the data, and we'll have a proposed calendar to you all before the November work session so that you can look at it, get additional feedback, and provide that to the group so they can then have a final recommendation for the next 2 years. So I just wanted to give you that update. Also, the Urban Schools Group has started meeting with individuals on the organizational audit that was requested by the board. So they have started having meetings with individuals. They will also be conducting focus groups. And we have an opportunity for a representative sample or more board members if you all want to participate. Right now, we have a session scheduled for Wednesday, October 19th, and this will also be in tomorrow's board update, but Wednesday the 19th at noon. And if we have more than 4 members who want to participate in a focus group around the structure of the board office, then Dr. Blankenship can add an additional focus group time. But the first one right now is scheduled for October 19th at 12 o'clock, and that will be in tomorrow's board update. Ms. Bonas and I had the opportunity, privilege yesterday of our first meeting of the year with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council. And I just wanted you all to know that we had 3 members that came back from last year. We just asked them to, and they shared with the group, and one of the things they talked about, all of them, that meant the most to them was presenting to you all last year. And how much it meant to, and one person said, even if they do nothing with what we said, the fact that someone heard us meant a lot. And I said, well, they have been emailing and they are going to do something with what you said. The mental health group talked a lot. That's something they're very passionate about. I told them that I would share that because that does need to continue. The other area that they talked about last year was wanting to do something collaboratively between the schools and the rivalry. And one student said something that was so powerful, and I don't know if you took it home, you probably did with you. She said, we talk about each other, but what we forget is how schools around us talk about all of us the same way. And it hurt, but it was powerful. Because basically what she was saying is we have to support and have each other's back, because when they talk about us from other districts, they lump us all together in the same way that we put each other down. And so if we're not lifting each other up, who's doing it? And to me, that was powerful from a 16, 17-year-old child, that we have to come together and be better than what other people say, but we have to start that internally. And so what I'm going, Dr. Scott isn't here today, but I'm hoping that they can work with our community engagement group and use that student group to start planning some of these engagement activities so that they can do that work together as East Side and West Side and really just being one Clark County. But they were very appreciative of how attentive you all were and just felt like, many of them said for the first time, leaders heard them and what their needs were. So I wanted to share that with you. And then our last thing is all of you have these amazing, and Ms. Hensley, I know you just love this, these amazing art books. And you have an invitation to the art show. And there is a partnership that happens annually, so we want to extend the board an invitation, and of course our CCSD staff and students and family to the Linden House Art Center on Tuesday, October 18th. And it's from 5:30 to 7, and that will be the opening reception for the exhibit. And the students did their themes around the prefix re, and the artwork is about remembering, repurposing, recycling, rethinking, reflecting, regrowing, coming back from the pandemic. How do we repurpose ourselves and the work? And so we will have high school musical ensembles from across the district that will be there that evening, and it's a great opportunity to see the power of CCSD Arts in action. One of the things that I'm really excited about, and I wanted to say this correctly, is the Athens Downtown Development Authority is going to install streetlight banners downtown with our students' artwork on them this year.
Wow.
So that's just, just gives me chills. I'm so excited, so excited. So make sure after the exhibit, shortly thereafter, you will be able to go downtown and see our students' artwork on the street lights, on banners, decorating Athens, Clark County. So that's exciting. So there are so many great things happening, but if you can drop into that, and if you can't go to the reception, make sure you take some time coming up this fall to go, and I'll get Mr. Smith to make sure, Mr. Gaskins, if he can let us know when those are installed, so that you all can go and just walk through town and see artwork from 21 of our students decorating downtown Athens. So it's just exciting things that are happening and great recognition for our students. So that concludes my report.
Fantastic. Thank you. So exciting. So exciting. Okay, we will move. Oh,
Can I
sorry.
ask one quick question? I noticed in the advisory reports that there's still no parent advisory committee that's operating. Is that your understanding? There are no parents coming forward to try to do a parents advisory committee?
I'm looking at Ms. Bonet. So we do have a parent that was leading that, and they had a meeting, but they have not met this school year. Now that you say that, I haven't been invited because I'm usually invited.
Right, yeah.
And then I know a couple of parents stepped up and wanted to really make sure that was going and consistent this year. We will follow up on that. I will start tomorrow.
Yeah, I would just like to encourage in this public forum that we would love to have more parents involved, and we're in a great place to receive input and to encourage parents to join that group and get involved.
Yes, ma'am, and I will follow up. I don't know if they have the same leadership this school year or not. We will make an effort tomorrow to find out and get back to you.
And if need be, we can make that announcement at next week's regular board meeting to try to get more parental involvement. Thank you, Dr. Yeager. All right, any other questions before we move on to item number 8? Okay, we will move on now to the financial reports for review. FY22 June financials. Mr. Schooneman?
Thank you. Good evening, Board and Dr. Thomas. So starting to get some feedback. Somebody have their mic on. I have before you the final FY22 financial reports. So this is through June 30th of 2022. If you recall, going back to our original FY22 budget, and Ms. Hensley, this is just a really kind of high-level, brief overview of what our plan was for last fiscal year, last school year. We had planned for a $3 million austerity, like basically a reduction in our QBE revenue. We also had planned as part of that budget to provide $500 retention supplements to all of our staff using CARES money. And then also part of that budget, we had planned for a $6 million decrease in our fund balance. So that means like our cash and the amount of reserves that we have was going to decrease by $6 million. And then by the end of the fiscal year or last school year, we were going to plan on ending that at 25% fund balance reserves. So we all know last year what happened, what actually transpired was drastically different than what the budget, what our plan was. So some of that unplanned activity, we're coming off the pandemic. We had high staffing shortages, which resulted in salary and benefit savings across the board. On the flip side, we were over budget and had high sub expenses and other kind of staffing service costs. Oddly enough, we had very strong revenue collection. So what we had budgeted for property taxes, TAVT, intangible and transfer taxes, all of those exceeded our expectations. And then to top it off, in January and February, the state came in and amended their budget, and they restored that austerity. So we had planned on that reduction of $3 million. They gave that back to us. They also provided an additional $2,000 supplement for all full-time staff and $1,000 for part-time staff. And they also came in and gave us additional bus allotments. So they said, hey, here's some additional funds for up to 6 more buses. So ultimately, what we had planned for, it kind of was not entirely thrown out the window, but what transpired was drastically different than the budget, and we ended up adding $9.7 million to the fund balance. So instead of our fund balance and cash reserves decreasing over the year, they actually increased by $9.7 million. Our revenues, which is one piece of that puzzle, it exceeded what we had budgeted of $176.6 million by $5.4 million. And the highlights there are local property taxes. We were up $500,000 from what we budgeted. Our transfer and intangible taxes, which are kind of hard to peg because that's basically a percentage of the amount of sales that we have in the real estate market and loans that are taken out. But that was up $900,000. Our TAVT revenue also exceeded what we budgeted by $900,000. And the big one there is our indirect costs. So we made the decision to charge our federal programs 100% of the indirect costs. And so what we had budgeted, I think it was about $450,000 for indirect costs. We collected much more than that, so it was about $2.2 million, and we do have a plan which we'll share with you next month. Actually, it'll be in the Friday update, hopefully, if I have time to put it in there. But what we're going to do with some of these excess funds, specifically with those indirect costs, we do have a plan. And then our QBE revenue, even though we accounted for the additional $3 million out of the overall $85 million planned for our district, we exceeded that budget by $200,000 as well. Our expenses, on the other hand, we had a budget of $182.8 million. What we ended up spending was $10.4 million less than that. And areas where we had pretty big, drastic savings. So just when we present the budget, we're saying, okay, here's our operational expenditures, which is your overhead, your lights, your buildings, contracted services, everything other than your personnel expenses, everything other than your salary and benefits. So whenever we're presenting budgets, we kind of like to differentiate between those two. So operating, we had saved $3.3 million, and then the top 4 cost centers were technology, who saved $960,000. There is data lines and telephone that we saved, and we get E-rate, which fluctuates throughout the year, so it's kind of hard to peg how much E-rate dollars we get, but that is what has caused the significant savings in both of those line items. We also left on the table $315,000 in software that we planned on spending and didn't end up spending. In transportation, if you recall, at that midterm allotment, the state gave us 6 buses. We had planned to buy 3 or 4 out of our general fund, and so we ended up saving $380,000 on buses because the state gave us additional allotments there. And then plant services, we added $775,000 there. You can see the top 3 areas of savings. And then also in our purchasing department, we had set aside and budgeted $150,000 for the disparity study, and we only spent $125,000. So we kind of just scratched the surface with that activity, and we have another $150,000 budgeted this year for that ongoing disparity study. And then next, we've got our salary and benefits. We had saved $7.5 million compared to what we had planned on spending. The biggest area across the board was on teachers. So we had saved $3.8 million on what we had budgeted for teachers compared to what we actually spent. The biggest savings were Cedar, Coyle, Barnett Shoals, Fowler, Oglethorpe, and Hillsman, and Clark Central High School. If you total all those up, that was about $2.7 million of that $3.8 million savings. We also saved $600,000 on paras, $525,000 in custodians, and then also roughly $3 million on the benefits which go with those salaries. So overall, when you have more revenues than anticipated and less expenditures than budgeted, we're going to add money to our bank account. And so at the end of the fiscal year, we added the $9.7 million. You can see our fund balance tracking there in yellow throughout the year. It started higher than that blue line, which was the previous year, and it ended higher. So if you go back to that first slide, remember we were planning on about a 24% fund balance at the end of the year. We ended at 33.4%. And with that level of reserves, I fully do not anticipate us dipping below that green level, that 15%, which is what we've identified as a board as being our safe threshold throughout the year. I fully do not anticipate dipping below that in FY23. On top of this this financial report, I've also included the Senate Bill 68, which is a detail of all of our funds, so all of our revenues, all of our expenditures, and then the corresponding budgets for all of our funds for last fiscal year. In our supplemental reports, our board member travel, that was only $2,500 out of $1,800, and our attorney's expenses came in at $181,000 compared to $223,000 budgeted. And then I've also ran for you and included any invoices in the final period that were greater than $10,000. And we also have that CARES and ARP budget dashboard link there and have that updated through the end of the fiscal year. So I know that was a ton of information, and I intentionally didn't pause on each slide to ask to see if you guys had any questions. But now, I guess if you guys do have any questions, I'll be happy to do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Schooneman. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you tell me what the federal indirect cost rate is again?
So for each federal program that we have, there is an allowable indirect cost that you can charge that program for operating that program. For instance, with special education, GDOE tells us how much we can charge that program, that separate pot of money, for running that program. So we treat that as revenue for our system, and for that program, it's a programmatic expense. So that because it is kind of proportional to the amount of federal dollars that we're getting, we've got tons of CARES money running through the district. You know, we had CARES 1, CARES 2, and ARP expenditures throughout the year, and we had charged the indirect cost rate on all of the federal programs during the year. So since our programs were relatively significant compared to previous years, we had a ton of indirect cost charges that we were able to charge those programs.
Okay, I got one more, and it's just to make sure that I'm not reading this wrong. On the first one, on the cash flow projection, where it says cash receipts, and then all the way at the end it says difference, and the majority of it's in red. So the red is what we didn't spend or what we went over?
Which slide are you referring to? Is it on one of the financial
so
reports or a slide?
Cash flow projection on the first file.
Okay, so if you're looking at the cash flow projection, the cash receipts on that far right-hand column where it's red, red is good. It shouldn't be. I should have that green, but the way the revenues are, when it is negative there in that column, it automatically populates it as red. I should try to reformat and have that green. But yeah, that means we are collecting more in each one of those categories compared to budget. That's the excess amount that we collected.
Okay, and then the ones that are blue.
So there is one, two
and then two
that
zeros.
are blue, and I think that is transportation fees. So I think we had budgeted $250,000 part of the budget for transportation fees. we only collected and charged our programs or external entities 117,000, and that's because we hardly did, or maybe even didn't do any field trips throughout the year. So without running those field trips, we didn't have the corresponding expense or revenue to collect.
So the red is good, and then the blue is
For
good?
revenues, correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a request, and I'll just put it in writing, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions?
Oh, since you're there, I'd asked about scatter plots for the wages for before and after our adjustments. Do we have any progress on that?
Selena, I think we had, if I'm not mistaken, I thought Selena had said she had something in mind that we could get to you. Go ahead.
So we talked to USHCA to see if they could possibly help us with that work. It's a little more
I
involved.
can't hear you. I'm sorry.
We talked with USHCA to see if they could help us with that work, and they are happy to do so. It's a little more involved. As I talked through it with them, it's more involved than what I had originally thought might be helpful. And so we need to get some more information from the board. And I believe Dr. Thomas had spoken with maybe Dr. Gant about getting with the board to get that information, or finding a time to get that information. So I'm not sure where we are on that, but we can follow up on it.
Yes, so we can get that to you in the board update. But we had looked at possibilities for increase in how we wanted to do those changes, if it was better to do one time or two time versus something across the board, and that was some of the discussion we had had.
Okay. Yes, I'm still very interested in that, because again, it tells us where we were before, where we are now, and it will glaringly point out anything that we need to pay special attention to as we look at salary adjustments across the board. I think it's a phenomenal baseline. I honestly never saw one until I worked for an R&D company, and they took pride in making sure everybody found their dot so that you could see whether or not there was disparity in how salaries were being treated. So, I mean, it was a significant change that we went through in our salary structure. Obviously, we didn't have any say-so about that, but certainly to be able to track the results of it so that we're not in that same place again would be meaningful.
And we were trying to see how we could blend that with what USHCA was already going to do, and looking at, and I'm trying to remember, Dr. Anderson, if we discussed it in one of our times together of determining how to effectively assess. So like I said, I know we had talked about doing like a mid-year something, but also trying to see how we effectively capture that data in a way that shows what you were, and I was trying to remember as I was answering earlier, the language you used, and I have it written in my old notes of how you wanted that information broken down, but then we were trying to see how we could get that in a way that actually captured what it is you were trying to see. So if we looked at it, you know, from a ethnicity or racial or gender, or how we looked at it, then how you compare that information in terms of job descriptions, job titles, how you weigh that also against the breakdown of ethnicity or demographics of people in those job categories. So if I recall correctly, just trying to understanding the intent of your question, but then trying to work with USHCA to see how to effectively capture that data in a way that would get to the results that you were wanting. And that was where I think we had struggled in some of the conversation that we had as a group of how to tease that out that actually gave useful information. Did I Can I say that
Mhm.
correctly?
If I can clarify my question, I'm more than happy to do that in writing.
That could be helpful because when we talked about, looking at changes that were made and how the salary structure, has been adjusted, trying to see how we look at that in a way that show disparity or inequity. So if you could provide us with a little more details around that,
Happy to do that.
it
Thank
would be
you.
helpful. Yes, ma'am.
And Dr. Thomas, I think another important piece of information to keep in mind is that we are currently going through the period of reviews that we had said that we would offer to staff, where they, if they felt they needed to have their placement on the salary schedule reviewed based on their experience and so on, we had them submit a request for that, and then we're working through processing those now. And so it probably would be a good way for us to have a clearer picture if we do it whatever we do, if we do it once we finish that, and that work will be complete by November.
This to me is kind of like hitting a button on an Excel spreadsheet and saying plot, right? So that you can do it anytime you've got these numbers, right? And so the goal was simply to see that picture before and the picture after. If the work hasn't changed, but the salaries and the number of people doing the work have changed, then this will show and reveal to us, you know, where are we spending our resources, and do we have inequities that are obvious here? So that's the point of my question. I'm not looking to have anybody reevaluate anything. It's just a point in time view that gives you a picture of exactly where your spending is in salaries across the board. And if there are some trends and things that show up, then it shows up to give us an opportunity to do better.
So I believe that this was mentioned when USHCA came and did their presentation. We asked them if they were able to do a salary sort of data dump, if you will, by race, ethnicity, gender, et cetera. We asked them that when they came and presented. I think part of the issue that the district is having is in digging up that data and then presenting it in a way that's meaningful. I know that you're asking for before and after, but I think what they're trying to say is that it's a lot more complicated than just a before and after.
I understand what they're saying.
When you look at the,
Right.
okay.
Yes, I'm good.
All right, so we're going to move on. If we can then just transition, unless anybody has any other questions. Okay. I had just two questions, Mr. Schooneman, if you don't mind. So the teacher salary savings of $7.5 million, was that a result of teacher shortages?
I would have to defer that question to Dr. Blankenship. I'm assuming that the shortage across the board was reflective of the statewide and nationwide teacher shortages that are ongoing.
So we budget the salaries based on what we've typically had in that position. So the majority of that savings is going to come from vacant positions, positions that are filled late. So maybe they're not filled till October, so you have a couple months of savings, or positions that are vacated early. And then you also may have someone, maybe you had a person who had a specialist or a doctorate in a position, but then you hire in somebody that has a bachelor's or a master's degree, and because teachers are paid on, or their pay is set based on their degree level and their years of experience, if someone comes in with fewer years of experience or a lower degree, then their salary is going to be less, so there's going to be some amount of savings there as well.
Okay. I mean, I guess I just asked because $7.5 million is a pretty heavy expense, and if that's at the expense of not feeling teacher presence in the buildings, then that's something that we should probably be cognizant of as a board. And then my second question was the electricity savings of 3.3 million. We were operating fully in 21, 22, so that's a really heavy.
I meant to kind of show how big the budget was for electricity, and when you only have 107, when you just look at it without any context, and you say, hey, there's $143,000 saved in electricity that we added back to our fund balance, it sounds like a big number, but then when you look at how much we budget and actually spend on electricity, it's kind of just a small fraction. So we really were pretty efficient when it comes to electricity budgeting.
Okay.
I have one more, since we so happy to talk to you, Byron. So the next question is, we have 2 unfunded mandates, right, in terms of schools. And so I understand that we did not, but maybe you've already taken care of that. Do we have any money put aside to do School C or ESA?
Not at the moment. I know that we had discussed coming up with a drafted long-term plan when it comes to facilities. I know that right now our population changes are actually decreasing in FTE, so the need to build those 2 schools is not there at the moment, and it's not projected to be for the next 5 years. So right now we have not set aside any funds from our general fund or other savings specifically to build those 2 schools.
And that's something I'd like to have a conversation with the board about, because if it ever shows up, we need to make sure that we're funded for that and we're not out trying to raise money to do that. So that would be my request. Thank you.
I do have just one simple question. I may be getting ahead of myself, and if it's a really basic question, please entertain me anyway as I learn a budget. But I know later when we vote at our business meeting, we're going to be possibly voting on some staff positions, or some, not staff positions, but some contracted services to fill some vacant staff positions. The money that we would use for that, is that coming from, or could that come from the savings with the teacher shortages, or would that be a different pot of money?
No, that's exactly right. Some of the staffing services we plan for a contracted service type of expense. We anticipate that. Others, I think specifically at some of those contracts that you're looking at tonight that are more specific to like special education. We've had a very challenging time filling those roles, and so instructional services is looking at other ways to provide those same services. And so that may, I had a discussion with Veronica Jackson about this, and we're not doing stuff like that to save money. We're doing that to still provide those services because we are likely not having teachers or paras fill those positions. So yeah, we do have to kind of take from one budgeted line item of salary and benefits, move it over to contracted services in order to pay for those, I guess 3 or 4 contracts that are on the agenda tonight.
That's right, and I actually had several notes about that, so you saved me from talking about it later. So the same thing with psychology, so you really are just, it almost ends up being budget neutral because the funds were allocated here in personnel and we haven't been able to fill because of the shortage. And so the funds that were allocated in staffing or personnel will just be shifted to contract to be able, and you probably saw that in some of the notes that Dr. Morgan put about psychologists and not being able to find people for those positions. So then working with those staffing companies to contract out that work, and it's the same thing also, as Mr. Schooneman just said, for several of our special education positions, is to then have to work with contract companies to meet those needs in order to support students instructionally because those vacancies. So you said it exactly right. So it's just moving it from this category to that category rather than it being budget adds on almost any of those that were there.
And if you look at that first bullet point under the FY22 unplanned activity, the same thing happened last year as a result of the staffing shortages or those positions that went either unfilled throughout the year or a portion of the year. We ended up having a higher than anticipated sub expense. So we're filling those sometimes with long-term subs. And when we can't do that, then we turn to staffing agencies, and so our staffing agency costs are more.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schooneman. Now we will move forward with item number 9, policies for board review. There are quite a few. And I think in the interest of time and just trying to be expeditious about this, are there questions about any particular policies that you would like to present to Ms. Bonet rather than going individually? Ms. Dykeman, Dr. Dykeman?
Sorry, I really appreciate that, thank you. And I actually have just a couple of changes that I wanted to let you know. I didn't want to change them in the agenda because I didn't want you to say, well, which version is it? But these are not reflected in the agenda, but these are the proposed changes to just a couple. So those first 3, with respect to special education programs, the change would be this paragraph. So special education law, as you can imagine, is very complex. There's a 180-something page implementation manual that we have on our, that we use when we're thinking about the application of special education law. So there's actually not required to have a policy. The law does not require that the board has a policy, but we get asked, what's the policy? So this way we can say, this is the policy we're gonna set forth. We're gonna use what's set forth in the manual. So this covers that one. The curriculum research one, we're gonna propose to leave in the part about for his or her own personal use, including dissertations or similar purposes. Because teachers and administrators collect data, we need this policy to apply when it is for personal use. So recommend putting that back and not striking it from that particular policy. The gender and equity in sports, unfortunately, is not ready for review, so I'm gonna pull that one and keep working on it. I apologize for that. And then I just wanted to quickly bring forth that this material harmful to minors complaint resolution, this is the result of a new law. It went into effect in July. It says that all boards should have a policy by January, and it's a complaint resolution process. It defines, I just pulled the model, it defines harmful to minors. It says who can make the complaint and how in writing, describing what is harmful or what they are purporting to be harmful. And then I just wanted to outline the timeline for you about that complaint resolution process, which is, again, in writing to the principal then reviews and investigates within 7 days. Then they agree on a different timeline, or within 10 business days, they meet with the parent or the guardian. There is a right to appeal to the board, and then the board would have 30 days. And then there's this part that says that the material that the board, if they decide is not harmful, the title will be published on the website for a year. So I just wanted to call attention to those few changes and to provide a little bit of background about that particular policy. And with that, yes. Any other questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I had questions about ABCDA, the board member unexpired term fulfillment, and IEDA, the recess unstructured break time. So I don't know if you just want me to state that and then see if there are other ones people want to discuss also.
Yeah, it's probably easier to just go ahead and address.
Yeah.
Okay.
As they come.
So the one about board member unexpired term fulfillment, I very much appreciate that we've tried to clarify the steps for filling the vacancy beyond just the board fills the vacancy. So I do appreciate that. I guess my concern about that one was the part that talks about the board president shall appoint a committee of not fewer than 3 board members to screen applications And then the screening committee shall select 2 persons from those making application to recommend to the entire board for consideration. And my concern was just that then you have a small committee of people deciding which applicants can be considered, and how that might play out in a practical way. I don't know if anyone, if that was discussed at all in the meeting.
There is a clause in Part D that says the board reserves the right to interview all applicants, including those who are not among the 2. So the whole pool will be available to the board, so you could always pull someone forward if you wanted to that was not chosen by the 2. But I hear you, what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess just because there are no actual criteria for what a board member's qualifications should be, I guess I didn't know how that committee would then narrow it down, other than their own sort of subjectivity.
So I had a similar concern, and it was simply that because you have D, why bother with C? It's a full board experience, and so I don't see any value in having a committee pared down unless we're going into a lobby situation, and I certainly don't want us to do that. No
So
equity there.
This one certainly, I think I picked up the notes from Dr. Harris on this one, but if there are different, please continue to discuss so that we can figure out how to draft this. And Mr. Pruitt will step in if it's illegal.
Can I comment? I mean, I think we could switch the word in B to the board president may appoint a committee instead of shall. So in the past, we've only had like 1 or 2 people apply for positions, right? And so I would just maybe leave it in that he or she, the board president, could or may, if there's like 100 applications, not to make the whole board go over 100 applications. But in the event that there's only 1 or 2, the board president may elect not to appoint a committee. Would that work?
Would that be the will of the board?
What's up?
Would that be the will of the board, just to change that language in the interest of moving it forward?
I think if the issue is that the number of people who actually get interviewed, which I agree with, that if in some case there were like 30 applicants, that you don't want to interview 30 people. I think it's nice to narrow that down, but I am with Ms. Davis in that I feel like it should be a whole board decision of which of those to interview. But again, I'm not sure exactly practically how that will work, and I am certainly happy that there is an attempt to try to make this process, to specify this process, although hopefully we won't ever need it again.
Mr. Pruitt, would a full board and a committee both be open to the public for the discussion part?
Yes.
Okay, so might I recommend that we just go ahead and pull this and we can bring it back to committee
I like
rather than this?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
So we'll
so
go ahead and pull this one.
We'll pull this one. I will just look for further comments. You can write them up, send them to each other, send them to me, and we'll go forward. Okay, and then the unstructured recess, unstructured break.
Yes, so I know that Dr. Yeager had mentioned this as well, the part where it says, teachers may not withhold breaks from students, but school administrators may do so in rare instances. I appreciate that the teachers may not withhold the breaks. I would prefer not to put in that school administrators may do so in rare instances. I think that sets it up so that some principals may use this and other principals may not. And so in some schools, kids might be getting recess taken away, and in other schools, they may not, depending on the administrator. And then if we want to say, which I would like to say, that unstructured break time is as important as any other academic or other thing that they do during the day. I think we should treat it the same, and I don't think we would ever say, as a punishment, you're not going to math today, or you're not going to your other class. So personally, I would like to make it so that we have unstructured break time and it can't be taken away.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Okay. Is it the will of the board to pull that language from that specific policy and then move it forward for review? Is that okay, Ms. Bonet?
Yeah, we can do that. It will say, you still have to address whether they can or they can't. So the language about disciplinary or academic reasons will say, no teacher or administrator may withhold for academic or disciplinary reasons.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So that will stay in for going forward for public comment. Okay.
Yep.
Any other,
With that change, yep.
just that, with that language change, thank you. Any other policy questions?
Policy JCAB, interviews and searches of students.
Yes, so that one just removed that beginning clause. It seemed superfluous. The reason to do interviews and searches of students to protect the safety and welfare of students.
Can we do that? Do we have to have a parent present, or is there some, I'm sure there's got to be more to it than just this, right? I'm not sure, just kind of.
There is, if I can jump, there's a regulation behind it,
Okay.
I'm sorry, there's a regulation behind it that Chief Jones, when Fabian Jones was chief, and I went over in some detail and felt was compliant with legal principles. I don't think anything has changed, so the real meat of it is in that regulation, and I think it's still valid.
Okay, I need to see that reg. Okay. Is that in our policy manual as well? Thank you. There, I remember it from a while ago, but it just seemed like this was, yeah, we can search you anytime we want. I don't see probable cause. I don't see anything that would indicate when it's an appropriate time to do that. Is what I'm missing.
If you look in the regulation, I think it'll tell you that it's.
It'll tell me more.
It'll tell you a whole lot more.
Okay.
And I think one of the things it'll tell you is that in schools, you don't have to have probable cause. You have to have something akin to the reasonable suspicion standard.
Okay. Are there any other policy questions, or would you like to pull that, Ms. Davis, for further
Yes.
discussion?
So right now they're set to go out for public comment for 30 days. And then they would be on the work session next time and then be voted on if there were public comment. We could discuss again.
Can we put the reg out with this as well? Because I think that would give clarity to, it was certainly, I'm going to go find that reg, but that would give more clarity to why we would say this in this way.
I don't know, probably.
So as I look, it looks like the reg is on assembly.
Correct. So all the regulations and exhibits are on Assembly. They are not approved by the board. So that's why I hesitated as to whether they can be put out for public comment. Probably. Technically they can, but I actually don't know the answer and we'll have to investigate.
Or could we put a link to the regulation in this policy so that?
We can certainly add a sentence that says, see regulation for further detail.
That would help me.
Okay.
Okay, so then the decision is to go ahead and push that forward for public comment, include the regulation as an attachment, and then as a board, if we so wish, we can continue to have conversations while it's out for public comment. Are there any other questions about policies before we move forward?
Good with that. Thank you. That's a great resolution for that.
Thank you. So those were the policies that are going out for public comment for your review tonight. The next batch is the ones that were on the work session last time. They've been out for public comment since then. I received no public comment, and so it is our recommendation that we move these to the consent agenda. for your vote next week.
Okay. These were discussed in previous meetings, so are we okay with moving them forward to next week? Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Bonas.
All right, thank you.
So just to clarify, we are pulling the gender inequity policy that was not ready for review, and we are also pulling the board vacancy, unfilled board vacancy policy for further discussion. Everything else will go forward for public comment. And if we still have questions as a board, we still have time to raise those questions. Okay. All right, moving forward. Item number 12. Wait, nope. Personnel, item number 11, personnel items. Board report, are there any questions about our board report? All right. Yes, ma'am.
Can't really talk about
That-
it.
If there are, is there a question? Okay. If there are no questions, it would be my recommendation that the board report be moved to consent. That would be item 11A.
All right, so with no questions, we're going to move that forward to next week's regular board meeting for a vote. And item number 11B, job description for the courier police officer position. I know that there were some questions via email. Would you like for Mr. Schieneman to come up and give a little bit more detail about that for those who had questions? Is that an 11B? The courier halftime position? Okay. Mr. Schieneman, do you mind please stepping forward and answering just a couple of questions about the courier police officer position? You may go forward. You may go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I got the answers to your questions, but the second question, I was gonna try to pull it up real fast. Where I asked about what's the difference between, I didn't answer specifically, but I'm asking now, what's the difference between an SRO and this person, considering that Brinks only did pick up every other week and not every week? This sounds like your response sounds like this would be an everyday job, like this would be their part-time, full-time job.
If I'm not mistaken, during the school year, Brinks was scheduled to pick up at each location twice per week. For all of FY '22, we were lucky if they came once every other week. I think they had suffered from some of the same staffing shortages and finding personnel that we did. And so that their service was just, spotty at best. And so I think their response to their lack of being able to attract and maintain and keep a qualified staff was to increase their wages, just like everybody else. And so they're just directly passing on those costs to us. And our budget, what we had paid per pickup with Brinks throughout the year, it was going up from like $24,000 or $25,000 up to, but it was between $75,000 and $80,000, and that's when we backed up and had to punt because the increase in cost was so drastic. We thought that we could do this in-house for less than half the cost.
Okay, so on background, it says to support our schools, to help keep our front office staff, business services budgets, funds the courier service, to pick up deposits on a bi-weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that
was a
meant-
mistake.
That's one of those things. too, when you
Bi-weekly,
say
I meant
every-
like
Twice a week.
twice a week,
Yes.
not every other week.
So not bi-monthly, bi-weekly, I think is that the question?
Semi-weekly.
Semi-weekly, there we go. That was my fault. I typed that up and I mixed up twice a week with bi-weekly. But yeah, keeping them staffed at other school districts. You asked about within our organization who else can do this. For instance, in Barrow County, I know that they have their secretaries take deposits to schools. In my previous experience in Baldwin County, we did the same. But in Clark County, we have much smaller elementary schools, much less FTE per location. We actually staff our front desks with only 2 personnel. We've got a secretary and then a clerk style position. And so rather than having those secretaries go out and make deposits and leaving the front desk with just 1 person or understaffed, historically the rationale that I have had for providing a courier service is so that those staff members stay in the schools.
So we're hiring a police officer to also be an SRO, right?
I don't know. This will be their primary job. Duty is just up to 19 hours a week going around and picking up deposits from locations and bringing them to Synovus. I don't believe it's
Right.
an hourly.
No.
Yeah,
I can speak to that. That was not, they're not SROs, so they are 19 hours going to 21 schools twice a week, so that would be 40-something. So they would go to the schools, pick up the deposits, take the deposits to the banks. And so they would have a rotation of twice a week to each school so that funds aren't left in the building. Your secondary schools tend to have more coming in, but your elementary schools at times of field trips and other events. So they would work 19 hours, but they would have like 40-something trips each week to go pick up and drop off. So they would have different schools they go to and make those deposits. Does that make sense? No, because you're looking at me like it doesn't. They don't have SRO. We're not hiring a person to do security at a school. We're hiring an armed officer to transport funds to replace what Brinks was doing.
Okay, so the reason why I asked that is because the job description, and I only read through it once, looks like we're hiring an SRO.
We're hiring a certified peace officer because we want it to be someone who is licensed and secure to be able to do what a Brinks officer would do, so it could be a retired SRO or a SRO probably would be a retired, someone who only wants to work 19%. So they would have the same qualifications that a armed security person would have for their safety. So does that clarify? So they would not want me to retire and come back and transport money. You would need someone who is like post-certified, who can be secure, pick up those funds, take them, and be able to protect themselves and our funds. Does that help a little more?
Yes. Well, the bi-weekly part was the biggest part, because when somebody say I get paid bi-weekly, that's every 2 weeks.
Twice.
Okay.
2 times per week per school.
They're picking up and then taking stuff to the bank.
To the bank.
And then the job description reads like an SRO because we need them to have those qualifications.
Right, we need them to be post-certified to be able to, because your Brinks officers carry weapons there, so we want it to be someone who can be,
So this is a permanent position, a permanent part-time position?
It's going to be an hourly, I think the rate will be $40 per hour. We don't have a strict schedule set up yet. I know during the school year when schools are operational, it'll be 2 pickups per week. During the summer when schools are out, the hours will be less. But that's kind of the plan right now. We don't have all of the details of their schedule worked out, but it is just going to be a position at 19 hours or less per week.
And we currently pay Brinks what annually?
They had gone up to almost 75,000. They used to be 24,000, and they had gone up to between 70 and 75,000 was their most recent recommendation, and this would cost us around 30,000. And we have some used vehicles that Mr. Schooneman has identified that the individual could use to transport those funds.
Are there any other questions? Okay. All right.
I would recommend, if there are no other questions or concerns, that we could move this also 11B to consent. unless you have additional questions, Ms. Gallagher, or anyone else that we need to pull to answer over the next week.
Okay. Am I hearing no? Okay, so then we will move that item forward to next week's regular meeting. And now moving down to item number 12, items for consent agenda discussion. I guess I'll just go item by item, and if you want it pulled, please just indicate so. 12A, September 1, 2022, called meeting minutes. B, September 1, 2022, work session minutes. C, September 8th, 2022, board meeting minutes. D, field trips. E, Marcus Institute Children's Health Care Contract. F, Caber UGA Classrooms at CRE Contract. G, Therapy Travelers Contract. H, Maxim Staffing Services Contract. I, Preferred Healthcare Staffing Psychology Contract Services Contract. It's a lot of contracts. J, Solient Staffing Services Contract.
Question.
Paul?
I just have a question.
Oh, okay.
So on this contract, what percentage of our workforce are they providing? Do we know?
Can you repeat that? What percentage of our workforce, what was that again?
Will this company provide?
Okay. Solient.
Solient Staffing Services.
We can get that information for you. We have about 40 para-professional vacancies and 20 or so teacher special ed vacancies. So that's just one of the staffing services that we would use. There are 2 others that we're also using to fill those vacancies. To supplement, yes, ma'am.
I really want to know those numbers, so thank you so much.
Ms. Davis, would you like to pull it until you get those numbers, or are you okay with keeping it on the consent agenda?
We can pull.
Okay, we'll go ahead and pull that then. We're pulling 12.
If I may, another option would be to leave it there. It can always be pulled at the beginning of next week's meeting if you don't have what you need.
Is that okay?
I'm fine.
Okay, let's do that then. If you could please follow up with those questions about Solient Staffing Services, and in the meantime, we will keep them in the consent agenda for follow-up next week. K, Supervisor Work Truck. And L, purchase of furniture for Clark Central High School modular units. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are we getting at Clark Central?
Those are for the trailers for their overfilled Clark Central.
So we've already outgrown capacity at Clark Central. Are these new trailers?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, I can't remember.
They were actually supposed to have been ordered pre-pandemic, and then we were out of school and we've gotten back in, and their numbers are still high. They're a little over 1,800 students, and so they are doubled and tripled up in classrooms. So these mobiles were scheduled, actually when I was chief of staff, we did the original walk for them, and so they need modulars to accommodate, and so then this furniture is just to have furnishings in those classrooms, desk and teacher desk and chairs for the students.
Where are they going?
If I'm still correct, the original location was to have them on the back side by the cafeteria. We had worked with Mr. Gilbert. Is that still correct, Dr. Askew?
They're already installed, correct.
They're in there now?
Yeah, behind the Crawford Gym. Yes, ma'am.
By the ROTC building?
He said they're
It's
behind
okay,
Crawford, so originally.
I'll drive over there,
okay.
thank you.
Originally, they were going to be back on that side by the ROTC building, but it sounds like they're farther up.
So
Thank you,
even with
Dr.
our decreased enrollment, we still have space needs at Clark Central? That's scary. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we okay with keeping that on the consent agenda? Were your questions answered, Ms. Davis?
My question has been answered, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we will keep all of these items on the consent agenda and have some follow-up conversations via email, and we'll see what happens next week. All right, fantastic. Now we will move on to item number 13, future business. Is there anything anyone would like to, Ms. Hull?
So I would like for us to have a discussion or just revisit how we're handling our student disciplinary hearings. I know we've had a really big push for restorative practices, and just an idea, I have no research, I don't even know if anyone is doing this, but there's an opportunity, instead of having just a hearing officer make a decision, to have a panel. I think it would be pretty cool to discuss having a panel that's maybe comprised of maybe a counselor or school psychologist, a social worker, and also someone who could speak to how a student would be able to continue their work with a punishment. And so just having maybe some discussions around how we can make that process more restorative and beneficial for our students.
Okay, I think perhaps we can, because that does seem to involve quite a few different pieces. Perhaps we can take that back to Superintendent Hooker and ask him how we can sort of formally get a group together to perhaps present at the next meeting, and then we can ask our questions at that point. Does that sound good? It might not happen at the November meeting. It might need a little bit more time.
Sure, and it's just food for thought. It's just a thought that I've been kind of having for a while and just wanted to put it out there. I'm not expecting any like quick action or super fast policy to be drafted or anything, but just thinking about how we can better serve our students, even those that are going through disciplinary situations.
Yeah. And that does kind of dovetail into the questions that we all had about restorative practices over the last couple of meetings, so maybe we could add on to that as well. Okay. All right, others? Yes, Dr. Maddox?
I would just like an update soon about the disparity study and where we are.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I don't know if you all receive them, but I receive emails almost every day that they're sending out to different businesses and people in the community asking them to be a part of focus groups. So I know Griffin and Strong has been doing a lot of communication. What I've been curious about is to see the responses that they've gotten and how many people have responded back to them to participate. But I know they have 2 to 3 times a week have been sending things out to area businesses, asking them to be a part of those focus groups. But I don't have information, and maybe that's something, because Mr. Schooneman, would you be able to get an update from Ms. Jackson on where they are? But I do know they've been pushing out a lot of requests to the community, but my hope has been that the community is being responsive to that.
If anybody wants one of those requests, I'll be happy to forward it to you. I get one every other 3 days, it seems. For
And
my
if I may, Dr.
business, not
Thomas,
for the school board.
So you have received those emails?
As have I.
Okay. Okay, good.
I know they also interviewed a lot of people within the district, because they interviewed me, gosh, probably 2 months ago now, so.
So you just like a time, like a progress report / estimated time for completion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing is, it's something with these microphones. It's hard to hear. Hopefully it's, it's sounding good, out there for our community. But it's really hard to hear what people are saying on this other end. I don't know if it's the same. I know I'm loud, but anyway. But I can barely hear it, like you all are fading out. Like I can barely hear your last line. So I just want to just put that out there. So I don't know if there's something that can be done, but it's been very challenging this evening to hear.
I agree. I've been over in Dr. Anderson's lap almost, because I keep leaning, trying, because I missed half of what Ms. Linda had asked earlier, and I was trying to put together pieces. I'm like, is she talking about the more money for this group, or is she talking? And I started leaning. So you're right. I'm struggling tonight too. So.
I apologize for I am a low talker. I discovered that, and people tell me. But there is an echo for me, and it is making me insane. And so, yes. All right.
So perhaps we can make an effort to speak a little bit loudly and more clearly, but also, I don't know, maybe our tech folks can have a look-see at some equipment that may help or something? Okay, all right.
7:26?
Yes, it is. Okay, so
Wait,
are there any other recommendations for future business? Yes, Ms. Gallagher.
I would, at some point, I would like to get like some information or maybe like presentations on the innovations that we're doing in the district, especially in regards to all of the grants, so not just LSGT grants, but with that, I think it was like 1.2 million in grants that we did to community organizations, just to like see how we're improving outcomes for students with the money that we're spending.
Okay. Okay, so, yeah, how would that look, Dr. T?
So one, with the LSGT, we could work with Mr. Barliman and Mr. Nobles, but then the other innovations and grants, I mean, some, I guess, would come from Mr. Gaskins and Dr. Elder, he said federal programs, so we can work on that.
Okay. All right, so I've got 3 items that will go, yeah. Yes.
I got one more. Also, can we, I know we did, like, all the principals came, but, like, can we, like, start highlighting our schools, just hearing about what they're doing? Because, like, if we're student-focused, it would be nice to hear about what our schools are doing, some of the great things that are going on in our district, so that it's easier to highlight it because we'll know about it.
Mm-hmm. So at the meetings, you're saying?
Yes, like just have, like schools want to celebrate themselves instead of, I know we do recognition at the beginning of meetings, but if they could come and just like brag on themselves, I think that's important so that everybody knows it's not just 1 or 2 schools because we're recognizing them for something. They're doing things, they're doing a lot of things and we can't highlight everything.
Like an invitation to the schools. Okay. So we're thinking something like an invitation to school leaders to get on the agenda for our regular meetings, to come and just brag on themselves? Okay. Okay.
Sorry. But just always having, like, I think everybody needs a constant reminder of what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
So always having it in front of us.
Okay. I wonder if Ms. Moore, is that something, is she here?
She's gone, that's what I was actually
I wonder if
thinking.
that's something that we could maybe talk a little bit
Mhm.
in detail with Ms. Moore, because it might take a little bit more coordinating than just an email. Everybody's busy. But, yeah, we can, yeah,
Right, to do
we'll have
something where she could schedule, and we always have a debrief on Fridays after board meetings with the entire cabinet. So, to kind of go through and see what each department or team needs to do. So that's something that we can discuss with her tomorrow to start working on a plan to coordinate that. I'm actually more envisioning like a sign up or something, where you could do a elementary or secondary, elementary or middle, and kind of rotate that around each time.
Yeah, or even if they can't make it here physically, they could send us something and we could just announce it if it's too much of a pull to get them here. But yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. So yeah, okay. Okay, so we've got 3 items for future business that we will definitely kick to President Gant to kind of start leading that effort with Dr. Hooker. And if we are ready, we're going to move on to the next item. Item number 14.
I move that we again acknowledge and appreciate Dr. Zernona Thomas for the extraordinary service that she has rendered this district. And on that note, I would ask that we celebrate her in adjournment.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Don't put that on the record. Don't put that on the record. All right, who seconded? Okay, Ms. Davis moved, Ms. Gallagher seconded, and we are adjourned at 7:29. Thank you.
The Hensley effect.